Hey there folks, let's settle in for the night. Tonight, let's drift back in time together. We're going to find ourselves in the world of the North American fur trapper. We're not here for the popular legend though, that lone figure in buckskin, a master of his domain who turned his back on civilization. That image, as compelling as it is, obscures a more complex and fascinating truth. This isn't a story about escaping the world, but one of profound, often invisible, connection. It's the surprising story of how global forces shaped the most isolated lives, and we'll discover it through the small moments and the forgotten textures of daily life. If you feel like it, leave a comment and let me know where you're listening from tonight. It's always so nice to know we're sharing this quiet space together. And just a brief thought before we drift away. When you return from this journey, if you found it a peaceful escape, a simple like or subscribe is a quiet, effortless way to let me know. It helps others find this little space of ours, and it means the world to me. So take this moment to truly settle in. Let your surroundings soften. Maybe pull a blanket up a little higher. There's no need to hold on to any facts or figures, just allow the story to be a gentle current, carrying you along. We're heading deep into the heart of the continent now, to the year 1825. Our story starts with one man, surrounded by the staggering silence of the Rocky Mountains. He believes he is entirely alone, a world away from everything. But as we'll soon see, he couldn't be more wrong. So let's find him there, in the faint, cold light just before sunrise. Oh, picture this. The year is 1825, and you are deep in the Rocky Mountains. You wake up on a bed of pine boughs, the sharp, clean scent filling your lungs with the morning cold. The air is so thin here it feels like a blade. You pull your rough wool blanket tighter around your shoulders, the coarse material scratching your neck. As you step outside your makeshift shelter, the only sounds are the whisper of wind through the fir trees and the distant cry of an eagle. You are utterly alone, a single, self-sufficient figure against a vast, indifferent wilderness. This is the image of the mountain man we all know. It's a powerful and romantic lie. But here's the thing. In your profound isolation, you are actually one of the most globally connected people on the continent. The truth was, you were what historians call a sensitive node in a sprawling economic network. Imagine you're checking your traps in a half-frozen stream. The number of beaver pelts you collect today has a direct connection to a high-stakes business negotiation happening in a stuffy office in London. A treaty signed in Ghent, Belgium, could determine whether you can afford to buy coffee and sugar next year. Your entire life, your survival, is tied to the volatile whims of people you will never meet, in places you will never see. Let's imagine for a moment you could see the invisible threads connecting your small, smoky campfire to the rest of the world. One thread follows your bundled furs downriver. They leave your cold, greasy hands and end up in the bustling port of St. Louis. Here, the clean mountain air you breathe is replaced by the thick, hazy smell of coal smoke and river mud. The silence you're used to is shattered by the clang of hammers, the shouts of merchants, and the churning of steamboat paddles. Your pelts, your hard work, are now just cargo in a loud, chaotic city. From St. Louis, your journey continues. Those bundles of fur are loaded onto another boat, heading for New York or Montreal. Then, they're packed into the dark, swaying hull of a transatlantic ship. After weeks at sea, smelling of salt and dampness, they arrive in a London warehouse. The scent of pine and wild rivers is long gone, replaced by must, dust, and the faint aroma of camphor used to keep moths away. Your quiet life in the mountains has just supplied a key commodity for a global superpower. According to historical records, some of these furs would even be shipped all the way to China to trade for tea and porcelain.
So what was all this fuss about?
It was all for the beaver. In your world, a beaver pelt is a heavy, dripping, gamey-smelling animal skin. It's a day's hard labor in icy water. But in Europe, it was known as soft gold. The real prize wasn't the glossy outer hair, but the fine, barbed underfur. This underfur had a unique quality that allowed it to be compressed into an incredibly durable and luxurious felt. That felt was the essential material for making the tall, fashionable hats worn by every gentleman of status. This relentless demand for hats created North America's first great global industry, and you were its most remote employee. This incredible network wasn't just built on pelts though. It was built on the sweat and endurance of thousands of men. But here's where the popular image gets it wrong again. The grizzled, independent mountain, Man you're picturing was just one type of trapper, and a relatively new one at that. The truth was, your daily life, your food, your language, your loyalties, even your sense of self depended entirely on which part of this massive machine you belonged to. So, let's meet the three key players in this continental enterprise. First, let's go back to our original scene. Welcome to the Rocky Mountains in the 1830s. You're an American mountain man, a trailblazer for a young and aggressive nation. There's a palpable energy of expansion in the air, a feeling that everything is up for grabs. You are defined by a fierce individualism. You feel the satisfying weight of your own Hawken rifle, smell the familiar scent of your own gunpowder, and take pride in your personal skill. As an archetypal American trapper, your success or failure rests entirely on your own shoulders. Your human impact is to push the boundaries of your nation ever westward. Now, let's rewind a couple of decades and shift the location. Imagine it's 1810, and you are a French-Canadian voyageur on a wide, churning river in the Great Lakes region. You are not alone. You feel the smooth, worn wood of a paddle in your calloused hands, moving in perfect rhythm with 15 other men. You hear the steady, powerful splash of the paddles and the sound of your crewmates singing to keep pace. The air smells of sweat, damp wool, and the sweet aroma of pine pitch used to seal the seams of your birch bark canoe. Your life is one of immense collective discipline, the logistical backbone of the Montreal-based fur trade. Finally, picture yourself in a different world entirely. The year is 1795 and you are standing inside the tall stone walls of a trading post on the shores of Hudson Bay. You are a short servant of the Hudson's Bay Company. You can feel a chill coming off the stone, a dampness that seeps into your bones even through your company-issued woolen coat. The air carries the scent of wood smoke from the hearth and salted cod from the storage rooms. Your day is governed not by the sun, but by the ringing of a company bell. Your world is one of rigid hierarchy, loyalty, and orderly, formalized trade with the local indigenous peoples, all based on centuries of British corporate policy. So there you have it. An aggressive American individualist, a disciplined French-Canadian paddler, and a loyal British company man. In the end, these three very different people were all threads in the same global tapestry. Don't worry, we'll explore each of their lives in detail. But through it all, one thing is clear. The man in the wilderness was never truly a hermit who escaped the world. Whether you were fighting off a grizzly in the Rockies or hauling canoes over a portage in Ontario, you were inextricably bound to it. Your lonely work was an essential gear in a machine that spanned the entire globe. You're hunkered down by a stream somewhere in the vast, unmapped wilderness of North America in the late 1790s. The cold air bites at your exposed skin, a constant reminder of your precarious existence. You can feel the rough, heavy texture of your wool coat and the cold steel of the traps you're meticulously setting. In this moment, your world feels incredibly small. It's defined by the snap of a twig, the scent of pine, and the hope of a good catch. You might believe your success or failure rests entirely on your own shoulders, on your skill and your grit. But the truth was, your entire life was being shaped by forces thousands of miles away, in the perfumed halls of European palaces. In the early 1800s, you need to imagine you're an emperor. Specifically, you are Napoleon Bonaparte, poring over maps in a quiet, candlelit room in Paris. The air smells of beeswax and old paper. Your fingers trace the outline of a massive territory in the New World called Louisiana. It's your grand ambition, a plan to re-establish a French empire in North America. This vast region, according to your strategy, would serve as a giant breadbasket. It would grow the food needed to supply France's most valuable colonial asset, the immensely profitable sugar colony of Saint-Domingue, known today as Haiti. For this one Caribbean island to function, an entire continent was meant to serve it. Now, that grand plan depended entirely on Saint-Domingue, but back in the Caribbean, a monumental event was unfolding that you, as a trapper in the wilderness, would eventually feel. In the late 1790s and early 1800s, the enslaved people of Saint-Domingue rose up in a successful revolution, creating the independent Republic of Haiti. The news would have traveled to you slowly, perhaps as a half-believed rumor whispered in a smoky tavern months or even years later. For Napoleon, the impact was immediate. His most profitable colony was gone, and with it, the entire reason for holding the Louisiana territory. Suddenly, his North American granary had no one to feed. The plan was shattered. The result of this distant revolution arrived in 1803, and it would change your world forever. With the Haitian plan in ruins and the looming threat of another war with Great Britain, Napoleon saw his American territory not as an asset, but as a liability he couldn't defend. So he made a deal. For just $15 million, he sold the entire 87,000 square miles to the young United States. You, huddled by your creek, might not hear about the Louisiana Purchase for a long time. But for the American fur trade, it was the sound of a starting gun. The nation had just doubled in size overnight, throwing open a vast fur-rich territory that had previously been the domain of French and Spanish traders. Welcome to St. Louis around 1804. You've just arrived in what is now the undisputed gateway to the west. The air is thick with the smell of damp river mud, freshly cut lumber, and the unmistakable scent of opportunity. The sounds of the city are a constant hum, the clang of blacksmiths forging new tools and the shouts of boatmen loading supplies onto keelboats. For you and hundreds of others, the Missouri River is no longer a foreign boundary, it's now an American highway leading into the heart of the continent. Ambitious men like Manuel Lisa are already founding new fur companies. And as Lewis and Clark send back reports of rivers richer in beaver and otter than any country, it feels like a personal invitation from the president himself for you to head west and make your fortune. Now, as you push up the Missouri River into this newly acquired territory, you soon realize you aren't alone. In the Great Lakes region and the upper Mississippi Valley, the years after the Louisiana Purchase are thick with tension. You can feel it in the cold, suspicious stares from trappers working for the British Northwest Company. The air itself seems to carry a metallic tang of rivalry. For the first time, your nationality truly matters. Your allegiances determine whether the next brigade you encounter will be a friendly source of news and supplies, or a hostile competitor ready to sabotage your trap lines. This local friction was merely a reflection of a much larger global conflict, as the Napoleonic Wars between Britain and France caught the United States in a precarious and dangerous middle ground. Congratulations, it's 1812. That simmering tension has finally boiled over into open conflict. You are now, whether you like it or not, operating in a war zone. The familiar, comforting sounds of the wilderness, the call of birds, the rustle of leaves, are now punctuated by the unsettling, distant pop of musket fire. The smell of wood smoke on the wind no longer promises a friendly campfire, it could mean a military encampment or a raided trading post. Historians now understand the War of 1812 as, in large part, a fur trade war. It was a direct contest for the control of territory, vital river trade routes, and the crucial allegiances of indigenous nations. For you, this isn't an abstract geopolitical event, it's a daily struggle for survival. Picture this: you've joined an expedition for the American Fur Company, led by the famous John Jacob Astor. After a grueling journey, you finally reach the Pacific Ocean in 1811 and help establish Fort Astoria at the mouth of the Columbia River. You can feel the cool, damp, salty air, a welcome change from the arid interior. But your sense of triumph is short-lived. With the outbreak of war, your tiny, isolated outpost is completely cut off. When a British warship appears on the horizon like a gray smudge against a gray sky, the choice becomes obvious. In 1813, the Astorians sell the entire enterprise to the rival Northwest Company for a fraction of its worth. Your grand American dream on the Pacific is crushed, a casualty of a war decided an ocean away. The war finally ends, and a few years later, in 1817, news of a major political change trickles out to you in the wilderness. It arrives with a supply caravan, written on a piece of paper that feels more permanent than any fort wall you've ever built. The United States Congress has passed a pivotal act, officially excluding all foreign traders from operating on American soil. The impact on your life is immediate and profound. If you're an American trapper working for Astor's reorganized company, you've just been handed a virtual monopoly. Don't worry, your competition has been eliminated by law. But if you're a French-Canadian voyageur, you now have to pack your canoe and stay north of the newly solidified border along the 49th parallel. Now, thousands of miles from your mountain stream, a gentleman in London or Paris in the 1830s makes a simple choice. He decides the beaver felt hat he's worn for years looks a bit dated. He wants something new. He buys a fashionable hat made of shimmering, smooth silk imported from Asia. He has no idea, but his small act of personal taste has just destroyed your entire industry. For over 2 centuries, the European demand for beaver felt was the economic engine of the North American fur trade. Suddenly, that engine dies. The shift in style is swift and brutal, and demand for your hard-won beaver pelts simply evaporates. You arrive at the annual rendezvous in the mid-1830s, your mules heavy with a year's catch of prime pelts. The mountain valley buzzes with the familiar sounds and smells of the gathering, of pine smoke, roasting meat, and cheap whiskey. But this year, there's a new, sour scent of desperation in the air. The company agent who inspects your furs has a grim look on his face. The price he offers you is a catastrophic fraction of what it was the year before. This market collapse is happening at the exact moment that decades of relentless trapping have pushed the beaver to the brink of depletion. The brutal math of your life no longer works. Just when you think things can't possibly get worse, an invisible force rolls across the globe. In 1837, a massive financial panic grips the world's economies, leading to a long and painful depression. You feel this crisis not as a headline, but as a chilling emptiness. The supply caravans you depend on for everything from flour to gunpowder simply stop coming. The fur companies back east, unable to secure credit, can no longer afford to finance the rendezvous. This was the final nail in the coffin. The rendezvous system, the very heart of your social and economic world, collapses. The last one is held in 1840. The era of the beaver trapper is over. Through it all, you and others found ways to survive, shifting to the bison robe trade or becoming guides for the settlers who followed. But the world you knew, a world built on a beaver and a felt hat, had vanished as quickly as it appeared. Imagine the classic image of a mountain man. You probably see a solitary figure, bearded and buck-skinned, completely disconnected from the wider world. You might imagine yourself in his place, alone for months, with only the wind and the mountains for company. The truth, however, was far more connected. In the early 19th century wilderness, you were never truly off the grid. You were part of a surprisingly effective, if incredibly slow, web of communication. Welcome to the wilderness grapevine. For an American trapper, your entire year revolved around a single event. Imagine it's the summer of 1830, and you're guiding your weary packhorse toward a predetermined meadow in the Rocky Mountains. You can hear the celebration before you see it, a low rumble of human activity echoing through the valley. The air, usually crisp with pine, now smells of wood smoke, roasting meat, whiskey, and hundreds of unwashed men. This is the annual Rocky Mountain Rendezvous, and for you, it is the center of the world. It's a chaotic, vibrant, and essential hub for information. The most important moment of the rendezvous is an arrival. You see a dust cloud on the horizon first, a smudge that grows for hours until it resolves into a long line of mules and wagons. This is the annual supply caravan from St. Louis, and it's your only physical link to the United States. As it rolls into camp, the men unload crates of traps, gunpowder, and coffee. But you're just as interested in the other cargo. They've brought stacks of year-old newspapers and bundles of letters. Here, in the middle of nowhere, you finally learn who won an election months ago or get news of a family you haven't seen in years. Once the caravan is unpacked, the real exchange begins. At night, you sit by a crackling fire, the warmth a welcome comfort against the cool mountain air. The man next to you, a trapper you haven't seen since last year, shares a story. He tells you about a new, safer pass through the Uintas he discovered. Another man warns your group away from the Bighorn River, describing a hostile encounter. According to historians, this peer-to-peer exchange was critical. You trade information on the movement of bison herds, the quality of trapping grounds, and, most importantly, you count noses, learning which of your comrades survived the harsh winter. This news is your most valuable currency. Now, let's leave the beautiful chaos of the rendezvous behind. Imagine a different scene, one of order and control. You're paddling up a wide, cold river, and a massive wooden fortress comes into view. This is a permanent trading post, like the Hudson's Bay Company's Fort Vancouver. The air here doesn't smell of a wild party but of cut lumber, organized commerce, and faint British authority. Unlike the mobile rendezvous, these forts were fixed nerve centers, bastions of knowledge in a vast and wild landscape. They represented a top-down, corporate approach to communication. Inside the palisade walls, you feel the shift in power. You've brought your season's catch of beaver pelts to trade. The man you answer to is the post's chief officer, known as the factor or the wintering partner. He stands in a sturdy wooden office that smells of ink and pipe tobacco. He is the gatekeeper of all official information flowing from the company headquarters, whether by sea from London or by canoe from Montreal. He tells you the company's price for furs, which areas the company wants trapped, and what directives have come down from on high. In the end, your access to supplies here depends on your willingness to follow the company line. This control of information was an explicit strategy. Following the War of 1812, you might find yourself stationed as a soldier at a new American outpost like Fort Snelling in Minnesota. Your post, smelling of fresh sawn pine and military discipline, was established for a clear purpose. The US government built these forts specifically to regulate trade and manage the flow of news in territories recently secured from British influence. It was a quieter, more systematic method of communication control, meant to project the authority of a young nation deep into the continent. But here's the thing about official channels: they were rarely the fastest. The European fur trade didn't enter an empty landscape. It overlaid a continent already crisscrossed by ancient and extensive indigenous trade and communication routes. You might be traveling with a guide from a local tribe. He understands the meaning of a smoke signal on a distant ridge that is invisible to you. News of a battle, a disease outbreak, or a shifting alliance could travel from one nation to another with incredible speed, often reaching a trading post days or weeks before the company's own messengers. To tap into this network, many traders relied on a vital practice. It was called marriage à la façon du pays, or after the fashion of the country. Imagine your small, rough-hewn cabin. The air is filled with the comforting smell of wood smoke and stew. Your wife, an indigenous woman from a nearby village, is your most trusted partner. According to historical accounts, these unions were powerful strategic alliances. She serves as your cultural and linguistic bridge, bringing you critical intelligence from her community that would otherwise be completely inaccessible. Through your new kinship network, you learn things that ensure your survival. The children of these unions, the Métis, became the indispensable heart of the fur trade's communication system. You need to send an urgent message across 200 miles of wilderness. You hire a Métis courier. He moves with an easy confidence, fluent in his own Michif language as well as French, Cree, and English. These individuals, like the famed interpreter George Bonga, who was of African and Ojibwe heritage, were the ultimate cultural brokers. They were a living, breathing telegraph service, connecting the disparate worlds of the frontier. And they weren't the only ones. If your work was in the Canadian trade, you would have known the voyageurs. You're in a massive birch-bark canoe, gliding across a cold northern lake. The only sounds are the dip of paddles and the constant, rhythmic singing of the French-Canadian men powering the vessel. These voyageurs were a communication network in perpetual motion, carrying letters, official orders, and endless streams of gossip along the northern waterways. And in the multicultural plains, where dozens of languages met, you'd witness another marvel: plain sign language. At a great trade gathering, you could watch a Cheyenne and a Crow leader negotiate a complex treaty with only the graceful movement of their hands. So, when you think of the mountain man, don't just picture him alone. Picture him at the rendezvous, eagerly reading a crumpled, year-old newspaper. Picture him listening intently to his indigenous wife, or relying on a Métis guide to navigate the complex social landscape. He was not an island. He was a single, vital node in a vast and complex human network. So next time you complain about your Wi-Fi being a little slow, just remember the wilderness grapevine. Somehow, through it all, they managed to stay connected. The word trapper likely brings a single image to your mind. It's a rugged figure, bearded and wrapped in buckskin, alone against a vast mountain wilderness. But the truth is, the world of the North American fur trade wasn't one single story. It was a continent-wide enterprise populated by profoundly different kinds of people, all living profoundly different lives. To understand the reality of their world, you have to appreciate that there wasn't just one type of trapper. There were at least 3 distinct archetypes, each forged by the company they kept and the ground beneath their feet. For now, let's place you in the role that has come to define the legend. Congratulations, you are an American mountain man. It's the early 1830s and your home is the vast, imposing landscape of the Rocky Mountains. You wake up not in a hut, but under a simple buffalo robe, the crisp morning air biting at your exposed skin. The scent of pine and cold stone is your daily reality. You rise, your joints aching from the hard ground, and your first thought is of your 2 most valuable possessions: your horse, grazing nearby, and your rifle. It's a heavy, large-caliber Hawken, its wooden stock smooth and familiar in your hands. This rifle is your provider, your protector, and your partner. You see yourself as the master of your own destiny. You are a free trapper, an agent of American expansion, beholden to no king or company. Your spirit is fiercely independent, thriving in the profound isolation of the high country. For months on end, your only companions are your horse, the rustle of wind in the aspens, and the echo of your own footsteps. You learned to read the land, to find the game trails, and to navigate by the stars. Your entire existence feels like an exercise in pure self-reliance. This powerful sense of freedom is the currency you truly trade in. It's what drew you out here, far beyond the constraints of St. Louis. But here's the thing. While your spirit feels free, your finances are anything but. You're operating in a system that historians call debt peonage. Before you ever set a single trap, you were outfitted by a company, perhaps the Rocky Mountain Fur Company. They gave you your horse, your rifle, your traps, your powder, and your beans on credit. This arrangement is known as being on halves. It means you are contractually obligated to sell every single pelt you collect back to that same company. You don't get to shop around for a better price. Is in the accounting. When you finally arrive at the summer rendezvous, the one great social event of your year, the company sets the prices. They buy your beaver pelts at a low, predetermined rate. Then, you have to buy your supplies for the next year from them. A simple tin pot, a bag of coffee, or a new blanket is sold at what's called mountain prices. These prices could be inflated by 600% or more over what they cost back east. So, after a year of brutal work, you might find that you've only just broken even, or worse, you're now deeper in debt. You've traded your labor for a few weeks of wild revelry and the supplies to do it all over again. That feeling of independence was, for most, a carefully managed illusion. The rendezvous itself is a shock to your system after so much solitude. For a few weeks, the quiet wilderness is replaced by a chaotic, sprawling camp. The air, once clean and cold, is now thick with the smoke of 100 campfires, the smell of roasting meat, and the stench of cheap whiskey. You hear a constant clamor of shouting in English, French, and a dozen indigenous languages. Here you trade your furs, gamble away your meager earnings, and reconnect with the few other men who understand your life. It's an explosive release of a year's worth of pent-up loneliness and hardship. It's a necessary ritual, but it leaves your pockets empty and your head aching, ready for another year of quiet work. Now, let's leave your camp in the Rockies. Travel northeast, across the plains and into the Great Lakes region. The landscape changes. The towering, dry peaks give way to dense forests and an endless maze of lakes and rivers. Here, you find an entirely different kind of man, the French-Canadian voyager. You are no longer an independent operator. Instead, you are an engagé, a contracted wage earner. Your life isn't defined by solitary wandering but by collective discipline and the rhythm of the paddle. Picture yourself in the early morning mist on a northern waterway. You're not on a horse, you're one of 8 men in a massive birch bark canoe, a canot du Nord. The only sounds are the gentle dip of your paddles in the dark water and the steady voice of the man in front of you, leading a call and response song. These songs aren't just for entertainment, they are the engine of your brigade, setting a relentless pace that you must maintain for 16 hours a day. Your back and shoulders burn with a familiar fire, a feeling you've come to accept as normal. Your world is governed by a rigid hierarchy. You are a voyageur, a paddler. The men who hire you, the clerks and partners of the Northwest Company, are the bourgeois. They ride in the center of the canoe, shaded from the sun, while you provide the power. You are paid a flat fee for a fixed term of service, usually a few years. There's no illusion of being your own boss. Your allegiance is to the brigade and your contract. Your pride comes not from individualism, but from shared endurance and the reputation of being a strong paddler or a man who can carry immense loads across the portages. This collective identity was the source of your strength. Unlike the often temporary alliances of the mountain men, your connections to the indigenous peoples of this region run deeper. For generations, voyageurs have married indigenous women à la façon du pays, meaning, according to the custom of the country. These weren't fleeting unions, they were the foundation of a new culture. Through these extensive family ties, a new people, the Métis, were born, blending European and indigenous traditions, languages, and skills. Your life as a voyageur wasn't just about extracting resources, it was about creating a new, integrated society in the heart of the continent. Finally, let's journey even further north, into the vast, subarctic territory controlled by the oldest corporation in the region, the Hudson's Bay Company. Here, you are not an independent contractor or a temporary wage earner. You are a servant of the company. Your life is centered on a permanent, fortified trading post, which the company calls a factory. Imagine the stark contrast. Instead of an open camp or a constantly moving canoe, your world is defined by wooden palisades. The air smells of wood smoke, stored furs, and the damp chill that seems to seep through the walls. Your days are not your own, they follow the strict routine and discipline of the company. The social structure here is the most rigid of all. It is a top-down corporate hierarchy, much like a military outpost. At the top are the officers, the factors and chief traders who manage the post. You are one of the servants, the laborers, tradesmen, and clerks who keep the enterprise running. Loyalty to the company is paramount. You are an HBC man, and your identity is tied to your position within this closed, all-encompassing system. Life is predictable, secure, and profoundly unfree. You eat company food, wear company clothes, and live in a company bunkhouse. Even the currency you use reinforces this closed loop. In your world, the dollar is meaningless. All goods and all labor are valued in a unique unit of account, the made beaver. A prime beaver pelt, tanned and ready for shipment, is worth 1 made beaver. Your salary is paid in it. A kettle might cost you 2 made beaver, a pound of tobacco might cost 1, and a musket might be 12. This system meant the company controlled every aspect of the economy. Your entire financial life, from your wages to your purchases, was managed internally by the HBC. It was a perfectly contained corporate world, long before such a thing was common. Through it all, you endured the incredible cold and isolation, a small cog in a vast and powerful machine, a world away from the chaotic freedom of the Rocky Mountains. To truly understand the men of the fur trade, you must first understand the ground beneath their feet. The continent of North America was not one wilderness but a patchwork of unforgiving environments, and each one forged a different kind of man. Let's return to the archetypal American mountain man in the 1830s. His world is the Rocky Mountains, a domain of staggering verticality, thin air, and vast arid basins. The rivers here are not highways, they are rock-strewn torrents, plunging down steep gradients, completely impassable by boat. This single geographic fact dictates his entire existence. The canoe, the workhorse of the East, is useless here. He must turn to the land. His essential partner is not a vessel, but an animal, the horse. This reliance on horse and mule trains gives birth to a uniquely American system. Your life is nomadic, following the seasons and the game. You are the master of your own small universe, a string of pack animals, the familiar weight of your hawk and rifle, and the traps on your back. The hawk in itself is a product of this world, a heavy, large-caliber, long-range rifle designed for taking down large game like elk and grizzly bears in open country, a far cry from the lighter trade muskets used elsewhere. Your pride comes from a fierce and necessary self-reliance. For months, you are the sole authority in your own life, a mindset that the vast, empty landscape both demands and rewards. This horse-based culture creates a new economic and social nucleus, the annual rendezvous. Because you can't ship your furs out by river, the company must come to you. The rendezvous is a logistical necessity, a temporary city of canvas, smoke, and chaos that rises from the sagebrush for a few weeks each summer. It's here that the illusion of your independence confronts the reality of your finances. You operate within a system of debt peonage. Outfitted on halves, you are bound to the company that fronted you your gear. At the rendezvous, they buy your furs at a low, fixed price and sell you next year's supplies at mountain prices, an inflation that could exceed 600%. You may feel like a king for the 2 weeks of revelry, but you often walk away with little more than a headache and another year's debt. Your freedom was the freedom to survive in the wilderness, but your labor belonged to a company in St. Louis. Now, let's leave the dry, open country of the Rockies behind. Journey northeast into a different world entirely, the Canadian Shield. Here, the landscape is the inverse of the high mountains. It's a low, wet, and seemingly endless labyrinth of lakes, rivers, and swamps, all tangled within a dense boreal forest. The horse is useless here, hopelessly bogged down in muskeg. In this world, there is only one king, the birch-bark canoe. This single technology creates a completely different man, the French-Canadian voyageur. He is not a solitary entrepreneur, but a contracted wage earner, an engagé. He is a human cog in a massive, water-based transportation machine. His life is one of immense collective discipline. As a milieu, or middleman, you paddle for up to 16 hours a day, the rhythm set not by your own whim, but by the call and response of paddling songs that echo across the water. Your skill is measured in endurance and strength, especially during the defining ordeal of your life, the portage. When the river becomes unrunnable, you leap into the cold water, unload the canoe, and haul 180-pound loads across muddy, insect-infested trails. This shared hardship forges your identity. Pride comes not from individualism, but from your reputation as a bon voyageur. Your world is governed by a rigid corporate hierarchy that exists right inside the canoe. The bourgeois, the company partners and clerks, ride as passengers, while you provide the engine. This system, perfected by the Northwest Company, allowed them to push deep into the continent, establishing extensive kinship networks with indigenous nations through marriage à la façon du pays. These alliances were so fundamental that they gave rise to a new people, the Métis, who became the indispensable cultural and linguistic brokers of the northern trade. Finally, we meet the third man, a servant of the Hudson's Bay Company. He represents yet another strategy. Initially, the British HBC was content to stay in its coastal factories on the shores of Hudson Bay, letting indigenous trappers come to them. Life in these forts was static, ordered, and rigidly hierarchical, run like a military outpost with Scottish officers and Orcadian laborers. All trade was conducted in the company's own currency, the made beaver, a closed system that ensured total economic control. But the aggressive, inland push of the NWC's voyageurs forced the HBC to adapt and compete. They built their own inland posts and deployed their own brigades. As these two rival systems, the American horse-based one and the British corporate one, expanded, they were destined to collide. This happened in the contested Oregon Country. Here, the land itself became a weapon. In the 1820s, the HBC governor, George Simpson, enacted a brutal and calculated policy. He ordered his trappers in the Snake River region to create a fur desert. Your mission was not just to trap, but to exterminate, to take every beaver, young and old, from the entire watershed. It was a deliberate act of ecological warfare, designed to create a barren buffer zone so devoid of wealth that it would halt the westward expansion of the Americans. The environment didn't just shape the man in the end, it was sacrificed as a tool of empire. The dust from the last rendezvous has settled. The songs and stories have faded into the mountain air. Your time in the Rockies is drawing to a close, not with a bang, but with the quiet turning of a page in history. You came to this wilderness seeking freedom, perhaps, or fortune. But what you're leaving behind is something far more complex and lasting than a cache of beaver pelts. Don't worry, your impact won't be forgotten. It's written on the very land you stand on. The truth is, you weren't just a trapper. You were an unwitting explorer, the vanguard of an empire you likely never thought much about. It's the early 1820s and you're leading a mule train through the Wyoming Rockies. The streams are trapped out, and you need to find a new path. For days, you navigate not by map, but by the subtle logic of the land. You follow the gentle rise of the terrain, looking for the path of least resistance. You're not looking for glory, you're just trying to get your animals through without breaking their legs. Eventually, you find it. It's not a dramatic, narrow pass, but a wide, almost imperceptible saddle in the mountains. This is South Pass. To you, it's just a practical route. But what you've actually found is the key that will unlock the rest of the continent. A decade later, you might stand on that same ridge and see something new. Below you, where your mules once plodded through sagebrush, a line of canvas-covered wagons is crawling west. The path you wore into the dirt to move furs has become the Oregon Trail, the great artery for American expansion. You and your fellow trappers didn't set out to map the West for others. You did it for yourselves, finding the best ways across the vast, intimidating landscape. Somehow, they managed to turn your private knowledge into public infrastructure. Your survival routes became the blueprint for a nation's destiny. Now imagine the place you called a winter camp. That crude collection of log huts and horse corrals, nestled in a river valley. At first, it smells of wood smoke, curing hides and damp earth. It's a temporary refuge from the crushing cold. But year after year, people return. It becomes a trading post, a permanent fixture on the land. The post draws more people, and soon, a dusty street forms. A blacksmith sets up shop. The fort you built for safety becomes the nucleus of a town. You can see this legacy on any modern map. The names of old fur posts, Fort Bridger, Fort Laramie, Fort Vancouver, are now cities, their origins as humble trading sites almost entirely forgotten by the people who live there. But here's the thing. The legacy you left wasn't just in the trails and towns. You also left a profound silence. In the 1830s, you revisit a valley that once teemed with life. You remember the constant sound of beaver tails slapping the water, a warning signal that echoed through the cottonwoods. The air was thick with the damp, earthy smell of their dams and lodges. The ground beneath your feet was spongy, marsh-like from the series of ponds they had engineered. This complex of beaver works was the heart of the valley's ecosystem, a place of immense richness and activity. Today, you stand in that same spot, and the only sound is the wind whistling through dry grass. The ponds are gone, replaced by cracked mud flats. The willows and aspens that depended on the high water table are withered and gray. The streams now run fast and deep, cutting into the valley floor because the dams that once slowed them are gone. What they found, after decades of relentless trapping, was that you could exhaust a river. You could create a fur desert. This wasn't just about the beaver vanishing, it was about the entire world they supported vanishing with them. This ecological devastation wasn't always an accidental byproduct of competition. Sometimes it was a deliberate strategy. Welcome to the Snake River country, a contested zone between American trappers and the British Hudson's Bay Company. Here, the HBC enacted a cold and calculated policy. They sent brigades of their own trappers into the region with a single order: leave nothing behind. According to historians, this was an act of ecological warfare. By trapping the region to extinction, they created a barren buffer zone, a hard west close fur desert, intended to be so worthless that it would discourage any American advancement toward their prized territory in Oregon. Your trapping wasn't just business, it was geopolitics played out with animal lives. The world you changed wasn't just one of rivers and animals, though. Perhaps the most profound and enduring legacy of your time in the wilderness was a human one. In the quiet of a winter camp or the bustling community around a trading post, you were not alone. Your life became interwoven with the indigenous peoples whose land you shared. Over the years, these connections deepened. You relied on them for knowledge, for trade, and for survival. And from these connections, a new and distinct North American people was born: the Métis. Imagine a community in the Red River Valley. You see families living in homes that blend European and indigenous styles. You hear a language that flows easily between French, Cree, and other tongues. The clothing is a practical and beautiful mix of buckskin, beadwork, and imported wool cloth. This isn't just a simple meeting of two cultures, this is the creation of a new one, born from the unique circumstances of the fur trade. The Métis became the essential brokers of the West. They understood both worlds, navigating the complex social and economic currents with a skill that neither Europeans nor indigenous groups alone possessed. Your personal choice to build a family here had a massive historical impact, creating a vibrant culture that would shape the future of the continent. So, in the end, the romantic myth of the lone mountain man, a rugged individual who escaped civilization, begins to crumble. The truth was, you were never truly separate from the world. You were deeply, inextricably connected to it. Your desire for a new rifle, the price you got for your pelts, the nationality of the company you worked for, all these things tethered you to global events. Treaties signed in faraway European capitals could determine which river you were allowed to trap. The whims of fashion in London or Paris could make you rich or leave you in debt. Through it all, you were a vital piece in a giant, complex machine. Let's picture this one last time. Follow a single pelt on its journey. It begins with your hands, numb from the freezing water of a rocky mountain stream. As you set your trap, you hear the sharp, metallic click as it sets. Days later, you pull a prime beaver from the water, its fur thick and glossy. You spend hours scraping, stretching, and drying the hide, the raw animal smell clinging to your clothes. From there, it's loaded onto a pack mule and begins a long, dusty trek to the annual rendezvous. At the rendezvous, it's traded for coffee, sugar, and lead. It's pressed into a 100-pound bale with hundreds of other pelts and begins the next leg of its journey, down the Missouri River to St. Louis. From a smoky warehouse there, it's shipped across the Atlantic Ocean, spending weeks in the dark, salty hold of a ship. It finally arrives in a noisy London workshop, a place that smells of hot water, chemical dyes, and singed hair. Here, your beaver pelt is pounded, steamed, and shaped into a sleek, fashionable top hat. And one foggy evening, that hat is placed on the head of a wealthy gentleman as he walks to his club, entirely unaware of the vast and rugged world his status symbol came from. You, the trapper, in your supposed isolation, were the first link in a chain that wrapped around the entire globe. And so, we bring our journey to a gentle close. The echoes of the past begin to fade, leaving behind only the soft hum of history. We've wandered through the quiet corners of the North American fur trade, exploring the lives and landscapes that shaped it. We didn't rush, didn't focus on grand pronouncements or dramatic turns. Instead, we simply let the quiet details, like the steady, rhythmic dip of a voyageur's paddle in a northern lake, wash over us, allowing the story to unfold at its own unhurried pace. We've seen how the profound, invisible threads of connection could tie a lonely campfire in the Rockies to the bustling streets of London, shaping the lives of those caught in its currents. The world we explored tonight, much like our own, was a tapestry woven from countless threads, some bright, some faded, all contributing to the whole. As you drift off, perhaps you can still feel the warmth from a crackling fire against the cool, thin mountain air, carrying you gently away from the noise of today. Thank you for settling in with us wherever you are in the world. It's a truly peaceful thought to know we've shared this quiet space, drifting through the past together. In the wilderness, a bent branch or a stone left on a high pass was a quiet signal to others on the trail. If this story offered you a peaceful path into sleep, consider leaving a like as your own quiet sign for us. And subscribing is like ensuring your name is on the roster for next year's rendezvous, so you won't miss the next shipment of stories when it arrives from the deep country of the past. For now, let the remaining sounds of my voice fade into the background. Your comfortable spot is waiting. There's nothing more to remember, nothing more to do. Just let the peace of the past settle over you, and drift into a deep and restful sleep. The story of the fur trade will be waiting, a quiet memory, when you return. Good night.